Hello everyone, this is Outstar and welcome to another Bloodlines 2 related video. We are just after the announcement of the first playable clan, of course if you don't consider Finnbloods as a clan. And it was confirmed that after about 5 hours of playing as a Finnblood, which is sort of a character creation slash character development slash character tutorial part of the game, you will be able to choose your own clan out of the 5 at first, but then next ones will be introduced in the DLCs and the clans available in those DLCs will be free for everyone. The very first introduced clan is BRUJAH. In this video we'll talk about them, both in terms of what abilities they will have in the game itself, to explain to you what BRUJAH are exactly and what is their history. So disclaimer before I start this video, an important one. BRUJAH were always a very political clan. Because of that, to fully explain them, I will use some terminology and winks to the modern politics, which might steer some people in the wrong way. This is not a video which will have any political opinion in it in terms of the actual world events or anything like that. We're always talking about role-playing, about the fictional world. So as much as I won't approach this video with any political agenda, I really hope that the watchers won't either. BRUJAH can be played and can be role-played in any sort of a way. They are very often radical, but this radicalism can be on any sort of the barricade, okay? So it doesn't really matter whether you want to roleplay as the radical left-wing, radical right-wing, radical vegan, radical feminist, radical hater of Epic Store, radical hater of V5 core book. Doesn't really matter, it all is applicable to BRUJAH. So with that in mind, I hope that I can just, jump into the video and we're going to approach it objectively, okay? I think to really understand BRUJAH fully, we need to go back to their history and see how exactly BRUJAH were formed. So a lot of people might be surprised by this, but the original BRUJAH, the antediluvian who started the whole clan, per se, was actually known of being very cold-hearted and painfully logical. He was a vampire who had problems with showing any emotions, and he was mainly embracing Childer who were deploying the same view. But among those Childer, there was one who was different, and that was Troil the Rebel. She was fierce, she was angry, and her embrace didn't end up very well. She ended up diablerizing her sire, BRUJAH. She usurped the clan as her own, starting the BRUJAH clan. And since then, the BRUJAH, although a lot of them were enlightened, they were the philosophers, they were the educated, the higher vampires, they were always tainted with the curse of anger and rage that was boiling within their veins. However, there is a small group that you might have heard about because a lot of people are talking about them in the comments from my previous videos, called the True BRUJAH. And True BRUJAH, they are pretty much non-existent nowadays, but they claim to be the descendants of this original antediluvian, the calm, detached BRUJAH. And their curse is that they actually have problems in showing their emotions. It's very much harder for them to develop high humanity, to empathize with humans. And they also have a little bit different disciplines. For example, most of them, instead of celerity, which is the supernatural speed, they own the temporis, which allows them to more or less control time, a very creepy discipline that a lot of other clans are afraid of. But true BRUJAH are almost non-existent nowadays, and I think it's very foolish to believe that you will be able to play as true BRUJAH in Bloodlines 2. So we're not going to talk about true BRUJAH anymore, we're going back to regular BRUJAH, the grandsires of the one that you may pick in the game. So a lot of the BRUJAH activity back in the days was in the Athens, in the ancient Greece. BRUJAH were trying to create this ideal, perfect world for themselves, trying to work with mortals and create this perfect political system to coexist together in peace. Unfortunately, that was destroyed by Ventru, who started back in the days to be main enemies of the BRUJAH. Then the mythical Carthage happened, the absolute utopia of what the BRUJAH want to have. The perfect world in which vampires and humans coexist together. They're all enlightened, educated, they do not fight, they do not wage wars. It's the perfect system, the system which probably never actually existed. Because according to other clans and other people who might have heard from their sire, Carthage did exist, but Carthage was fueled by the children's sacrifice sacrifice, bloody rituals to gods. The very evil Bali were very apparent in there, and yeah, everyone except for Bruja doesn't really believe in that whole Carthage was great thing. But Carthage, as all other utopic Bruja projects, fell to Ventru yet again. This time with the help of Malkavians of Rome, they both unionized together to destroy the Carthage and spread the salt all over the ground to prevent any vampires from rising back. Bruja didn't cease their hunger for more then though, and in Dark Ages they actually acquired back their power and influence and became one of the higher clans. They were devoted to the classic Greek philosophy, and the neonative Bruja clan were trained in combat as well as in the classics at the same time. This is the Bruja, or actually the BRUJAH as it was called in Vampire Redemption, that you were able to play in that game. Christoph is not a member of true Bruja, as some people call him. Christoph is one of these enlightened Bruja living in the Dark Ages. They were the main force in the Bruja faction back in the days. However, the division in the Bruja clan starts to be very apparent when the Renaissance has come and further along the way during the Victorian Ages and the Industrial Revolution. The learned clans started to divide because of a lot of the members of Bruja believing that they are stagnant, that they are too attached to the old ideals. And as much as some members of the Bruja clan still wanted to follow this ancient Greek philosophy and live in that particular way, a lot of them turned into some kind of a vampiric proletariat. They considered themselves the ones that need to wield the torch of revolution and change the status quo. A lot of them turned to Marxism, to Darwinism. If you try to study history books and if you try to apply that to the Vampire the Masquerade setting, all the revolutions, including the French Revolution of course, uprisings, and big projects that tried to change how the world or some countries looked like. Think Soviet Union, for example. They were all the projects of Bruja who tried to set the new world's peace or the new world order. Basically all mainly utopic ideas that were developed throughout the ages were originating from Bruja. So the current situation of Bruja is mostly dictated by the actions of a guy called Theobald. Theobald is a very prominent member of a Bruja clan that was, surprisingly, through most of his history, associated with Camarilla. And that was actually one of the reasons why Bruja were still a part of the Camarilla back when Bloodlines 1 happened, although a lot of them were parts of the Anarchs as well. But nowadays, in the new timeline in V5, Theobald finally said, enough of it, I'm not going to suck up to Ventru bosses anymore, and he moved to Anarchs, and almost all Bruja followed. So nowadays Bruja are not really considered a part of the Camarilla, although some Bruja still remain as a part of it. I'll talk about them a little bit later. But Theobald is not really fully Anarch per se. He's still very respected both by Camarilla, even by the Sabbat. He serves as a diplomat in between all the factions because he never takes any shit from anyone. So in Seattle apparently there are not a lot of Bruja, there are just a few of them, and most of them are from the failed Anarch movements, as Anarchs apparently don't really have that much of a power in Seattle nowadays, but maybe we'll be able to change that in the course of the game. Now, knowing Bruja history, we are able to jump into who Bruja are nowadays and what archetypes we can see among the Bruja. So let me start with a very controversial statement. I know I'm jumping on a lot of minds in there, but again, I really hope that we will be all mature in here and we'll try to approach what I'm saying from the objective point of view. So the controversial statement I'm going to say right now is that all Bruja are SJWs. But wait with me, just put your pitchforks down, okay? We need to take the name SJW very directly in this particular context. The warriors of social justice, literally. And by social justice, you can really mean anything, because you can have a different view on what the social justice is, right? They might be fighting for some sort of a political faction, they might be fighting for themselves, they might be fighting for people with a selected opinion. Maybe your opinion is that pineapple pizza is horrible and we need to fight it with all resources we can. That's also very much of a Bruja thing. You can be a social justice warrior for the rights of not eating pineapple pizza. Now, not all the Brujas are exactly the fighters for the certain ideology, but about that a little bit later. First of all, let's focus on what kind of people are usually turned into Brujas. Of course, the first thing that may come to mind are punks or people living in the squats, but that's not the only image of Brujas. You see, they can also embrace, for example, people working for big corporations and trying to hack them from the inside. Think Mr. Robot. They can also embrace lawyers in full suits who actually work pro bono to help the poor. They can also embrace neo-Nazi or any people with very extreme views. As long as they strongly believe in them and are willing to fight for them, they are a good candidate for a Brujas clan. Finally, they can also embrace basement dwellers who pirate games and movies and put them on Pirate Bay all day and night, because that's also a way of fighting the status quo. And that's ultimately what Brujas stand against. If you are standing against the status quo in any way, doesn't matter if it's from the left, right, up or bottom, you are a good candidate to join the Brujas. Now, the book mentions some very interesting archetypes of Brujas that show you the variety of the clan. The first one is Cancer in the system. That is someone who works in a corporation, an office worker in the political party, which is wrong in a lot of means, or even a member of Camarilla, working from the inside to either break things up or maybe make them better. Not all Brujas are all about destruction, some of them want to repair the world from the inside, and a lot of these are actually in this particular archetype. The second one is Voice of the People, and that's the one I mentioned the most before. Political activists, the ones that start the events on Facebook to gather folks around some corporations and protests. Former feminists or former alt-righters, very often troublemakers, but they make the core of most of the modern revolutions, rallies and protests. They often bring a lot of problems to the clan itself, and the clan leaders or the elders may disagree with them, but well, that's all that Brujas are about, right? Disagreements. Then another archetype is the Blood Worshipper, and to make it easier, I call them the Slytherin of Brujas clan. As I told you, in the Dark Ages, Brujas were considered better than other clans mostly. They were very much respected by everyone else. And blood worshippers, they heard about these days, and they still believe that their blood is somehow superior to the blood of other vampires. They still believe that they are by definition better, and they are made to rule the other clans. And they should obey because that's just their blood right. They often come from fundamentalist backgrounds. In general, if you remember Slytherin in Harry Potter and those wizards which believe they were better than others because of their pure blood, that's the blood worshippers for you. And there's an archetype like that in the game because, again, we are not talking here about your actual real-life views. You can roleplay as someone like that. So I do really believe that roleplaying either a blood worshipper who is a neo-Nazi or roleplaying a Voice of the People who is the super radical feminist can be both really fun and educational experience. Doesn't matter what kind of views you have in real life. Again, it's just a game, don't forget about it. And I think V5 does a good job, especially with Brujas, in trying to incorporate all of these possible real-life views and giving the background for them in a video game. Now we have another archetype, and that's kind of like a fish milk for Brujas, but again, it is in the system because it is sometimes fun to roleplay a character like that. And that archetype is the trolling punk. They are not in it all for some kind of ideology or to change or repair the world. Nah, they are there for a fight. It's either a punk squatter who is just in that whole environment to piss off the police because that's fun. It might be a fourth wave feminist who spends more time attacking other feminists than actually doing something good in the world. Or that might be people watching Vampire Bloodlines 2 videos and commenting under every single one of my videos that this game is going to be shit no matter what. Basically, anyone who is just there to steer some trouble because that's fun, that's the trolling punk for you. People may wonder what is exactly the purpose of them, but the little actions that trolling punks do every single day, they might actually be a very good base for future protests, riots, or changes in the establishment. And that's ultimately what Brujas tries to do. They try to change the establishment in many different ways. So trolling punks are not entirely useless. They actually serve a pretty decent purpose. Last but not least, we have Monster in Disguise, and that is actually very similar similar to one of the archetypes of Finnbloods I talked in my previous video. So monsters in disguise are Brujas who still maintain very high humanity and they try their best to live their mortal life. I think it is way harder for vampires, for fully fledged vampires to live this sort of a life than if you're a Finnblood. Because you are often not lifelike, you do take damage from the sun, you can never ever see any ray of the sun. And your hunger and your frenzy prevents you from fully separating yourself from a beast and actually trying to live this life fully without any moments where you succumb to the red. Monsters in disguise very often stay in their human lives for the ideological reasons, because that's the only way for them to still lead a political party or lead some foundation or charity or whatever they're doing. However, it's a hard life to live and it very often ends with a massacre. Now, their curse should be quite logical by this point of the video. The curse of Bruja is that they fall into the frenzy easier than other vampires. They are very short-tempered and it is very easy to make Bruja angry. One of the Paradox employees actually said that he really wants to roleplay in the game as this very frail, beautiful Bruja lady that looks totally innocent and tries to make the world better, but when someone makes her angry, the freaking chopped off heads are flying around. That's what the curse of Bruja is. You cannot really control your beast fully. Now, except for a curse, all clans also have their own compulsions. Compulsion is more like a behavior that happens to you more often than your curse is triggered. Compulsion dictates how you act in everyday situations. Under different circumstances, no matter how high your hunger is, your compulsion is pushing you towards some actions more than the others. So for Bruja, that compulsion is their fight against the status quo. Now, this fight can be interpreted in many different ways. Maybe it's the leader of your RPG party. Maybe it's the task that someone has put on you. As a Bruja, you are expected to actively oppose any status quo or try to change someone else's opinion to finally have your own agenda pushed. If you are just phlegmatically succumbing to everything that is happening around you, if you're obedient, you suffer dice penalties, which basically means that all your abilities will be weaker than they should be. This compulsion ends when you manage to do something against someone else, or something else, or once you manage to convince someone to your own agenda. So if you want to translate it to Bloodlines 1, for example, when you're playing as Bruja, you would be more likely to disobey LaCroix and be super mean to him. We don't know yet how this compulsion will be used in the game or whether there will be any chance to actually fully utilize it, but I think it makes a very important part of the roleplay. If you want to fully roleplay as a Bruja in the new game, try to say no more often. Be assertive. Don't just say yes to everything. So Bruja in the pen and paper game, they have 3 disciplines just like every other clan. They have celerity, potence, and presence. Now, only 2 of these disciplines will be available in the game. Why? Because in the end, your vampire will end up like any other vampire in Bloodlines 1 or most of the vampires in pen and paper game, owning 3 disciplines. As I said before, you start the game as a Finnblood and you pick one of the Finnblooded disciplines, and then once you pick a clan, 2 more disciplines are added to that. I'm going to very quickly explain. I personally believe it's a good choice from the design perspective, because every discipline gives you 2 active abilities to use in the combat, meaning that in the end you will have 6 abilities to use when you're fighting someone. With another discipline, that would be 8, and this game will literally turn into an MMORPG. A lot of people don't agree with me and they feel like this 3rd discipline is very much needed. I will start with the discipline that they purposefully left out, and that's presence. I do believe that they left it out because Toreadors are going to have presence. That's my first idea. And second, developers actually said on the stream that presence, of course, is important for Bruja because that's how they were able to charismatically lead all those rallies and revolutions in the history. But in the game, you'll still be able to be charismatic and pick a lot of the social skills that will allow you to convince people to your own will, or maybe intimidate them, as Bruja still often used presence as a form of intimidation. So presence, as much as it won't be per se a passive discipline, I guess you could interpret it in a way that you will be still able to control people around you and control their emotions towards you and towards your views by using a lot of different social skills. It just won't be an active skill that you will use the blood on. The active skills will be potence and celerity. Celerity allows you to have supernatural speed, and apparently it is very fun in the game. Developers said that it's one of their favorite disciplines in the game in terms of how it works in the combat, because you can literally blink through the enemies and just kill them in a very quick fashion. There's also a bullet time ability, which allows you to avoid bullets and kind of behave like Neo in Matrix or Max Payne maybe. In general, just wear a leather jacket and glasses and do the woo. That was my impression of Neo from Matrix, I'm sorry. And then the potence, which is I think the major discipline for Bruja clan. I think the easiest way to explain potence is that if you would embrace an old man or a small child into Bruja clan, no matter how frail they would be, a single fist punch from them would be able to kill a mortal. Potence is a supernatural strength. It's something that shatters buildings and the pavements and destroys people. There will be 2 active abilities, which are actually the maximum level abilities from the V5 core book, and that's the Fist of Cain and the Earth Shock. Fist of Cain, again, very strong fist, allows you to deal massive damage to people, and Earth Shock allows you to stomp the ground in the way that sends the shockwave throughout your enemies. That kind of breaks the Masquerade, so don't do that in public. So yeah guys, that's it for the Bruja. I really hope that my video was explanatory and gave you a background in how to exactly roleplay Bruja once you will pick them in the game. A small addition and a very fun one, I think. I've read in one of the articles that apparently picking a clan will give you a very different player experience from different clans, including unique locations and quest lines. So if you want to truly explore the game fully, you would want to play this game as all of the clans. Especially as some choices that you make in literally the first 15 minutes of the game can affect things later in the game in quite of a major way. So for those of you who will say right now, I won't be picking Bruja, or maybe I will pick Bruja but not the other clan, I want to give you an advice: try to approach this game open-mindedly, because you might as well end up replaying it as different clans. And I think that's what I will do. Anyway, 2 more videos are on the way. One of them is the long time promised sex and romance, you know what I mean, video explaining how exactly sex works in the world of vampires. And another thing which I'm preparing right now, which I'm super excited for, if you guys haven't seen yet my recreation of Cyberpunk demo done in Photoshop, I am going to do the same thing for Bloodlines 2. I stumbled upon a very detailed explanation of the demo and what happens step by step. I compared few of the articles, I prepared the script, and I am ready to do this. Anyway, I hope you guys are waiting for these as much as I am, and thank you so much for joining again. Remember, don't get lost in the night, and if you do, have a Bruja to punch your way through the obstacles. Yes. Goodbye.